Ancient Egypt is one of the most fascinating civilizations the world has ever known. It's been studied for thousands of years, and although it has left us with many surviving artifacts, there is still much speculation about what the ancient Egyptians actually looked like. The Western media often portrays ancient Egyptians as having white or brown skin. But is this accurate? Were the ancient Egyptians black? Here we will examine the evidence. Deviant knowledge tries to bring you history you were never taught and voices you never heard. If you enjoy this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you appreciate little-known histories and non-mainstream perspectives, please consider subscribing. We're just starting out, and we're looking to build a community of fellow deviant heads. Few civilizations have fascinated scholars throughout the centuries as much as the ancient Egyptians. Seen as one of the cradles of humanity, the questions of who they were and how they came to be have always had profound meaning for how we see ourselves. And answering these questions often pivots on issues of group identity and, too often, reflects modern-day preconceptions and bigotries. Ascertaining the skin color or even the genetic history of the ancient Egyptians has many problems. Scientists today question the validity of skeletal measurements. Artist renditions are often confused with scientific facts, and often people take the image of a single person and infer the physical appearance of all Egyptians. During the 18th century, the debate about the skin color of the ancient Egyptians intensified. Georges Cuvier, the great French scientist, claimed that autopsied mummies proved they were Caucasian. Other academics refer to Herodotus, who described Egyptians as dark-skinned and woolly-haired. Far from a merely academic debate of mild interest, in America of the early to mid-19th century, the question was crucial to many arguments for the abolition of slavery. If the people kept as slaves could produce the pyramids, how could anyone suggest that they were of lower intelligence or reasoning than the contemporary white man? Many scholars pushed the idea that Egyptians must have been of a separate race to be so advanced. This idea was expressed as the dynastic race theory. Dynastic race theory suggested that the first kings of Egypt were invaders, conquerors of the indigenous tribes of the area, who brought with them an advanced understanding of technology. Dynastic race theory was promoted by scholars such as Sir William Matthew Flinders Petrie. Petrie believed there were distinct differences between the skeletons of early kings and their subjects. Followers of this theory generally argued that these invaders were from Mesopotamia and therefore not African. Dynastic race theory was used to support the idea that black Egyptians could not be so technologically advanced. However, modern scholars generally do not consider dynastic race theory as reasonable, and Petrie's method for measuring skeletons is widely considered archaic and unreliable. In 1974, UNESCO held a symposium titled On the Peopling of Ancient Egypt and the Deciphering of the Meroitic Script. Its purpose was to determine the history of ancient Egyptians. Taking submissions from experts from all over the world and a range of perspectives, the results were compiled into what would form chapters in a volume of The General History of Africa. The consensus was that ancient Egyptians were indigenous to the area, with a range of skin pigmentation, and had some familial relationships to the rest of Africa. In line with this, modern scientists reject the idea of classifying the race and skin color of ancient Egyptians using the denotations which underlie social divisions in modern America. When you talk about Egypt, it's just not right to talk about black or white. That's all just American terminology, and it serves American purposes. Recently, scientists have been able to scrutinize the DNA sequences of mummies. Their results suggest many ancient Egyptians were closely related to the people of the eastern Mediterranean and Near East, a land covering Jordan, Israel, Turkey, Syria, and Lebanon. This ties in with many surviving Egyptian art and artifacts which have a brown skin color. For example, wall paintings from Tutankhamun's tomb show figures whose skin has an umber tone, and the Book of the Dead of Hunefer contains numerous figures with brown-toned skin colors. A 2005 CAT scan of Tutankhamun showed the skull of a North African, but with a nose opening that suggested narrow nostrils, a European characteristic. Scientists agreed that determining skin or eye color from scans is impossible, and reconstructions were based on the skin of contemporary Egyptians, affected by the interracial breeding of the last few centuries. A genetics company attempted to examine Tut's genetic markers, but did not have sufficient data to make a solid conclusion. Ultimately, all we know of the child pharaoh's background is that his family, back to his grandparents, all lived in Egypt. Although the argument that Cleopatra was black goes back to the 1940s and has been repeated every few decades, there is no evidence for such an argument. In 2009, an Austrian scientist claimed that her mother may have been black. This conclusion was based on the skeletal measurements of a mummy he believed to be her sister. However, skeletal measurements are a poor indication of race. In addition, the evidence that this particular skeleton was related to Cleopatra was based on ancient notes and poorly maintained photographs of the original dig site. Of the 104 million people living in modern-day Egypt, most have biological characteristics more similar to those of sub-Saharan Africans rather than those of Europeans. And scientists who have examined blood samples from mummies have found them to be similar to both the Egyptians of today and to those in other areas of North Africa. While studies continue, the current consensus is that the population of Egypt has not changed much over the millennia, and primarily finds ancestors in both North Africa and the Levant. Were ancient Egyptians black? This depends on your definition of black. Most came from North Africa or below, but there is also evidence that they mixed with people from the Levant and Europe.